on the 17th of June, 2019. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our first order of business is to approve the minutes from the last session, which was held on the 15th of April.
So moved.
Okay, I got a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and it's approved. Thank you. Next call to business is public comments on agenda items. Do I have any public comments? Okay, let it be known I have no public comments. Okay, we'll move right into the Chief Executive Officer's report.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance and Audit Committee. At the regular board meeting in June, you received an overview of the HART Safety and Security Program. Really received an affirmation that our employees and customers are the number one priorities at HART. Since then, staff's been working in close partnership with the local ATU to secure a solution regarding the installation of the protective barriers. Happy to report that last Thursday, we reached an agreement with the ATU leadership about the specific type of protective barrier. There's many options out there. And that we are moving forward with the installation on all of the HART buses as well as the HART Flex vans. The ATU have really been fantastic partners throughout this whole process. It was top priority for both of us to find a protective barrier solution that was going to meet our operator needs going forward. So under your direction at the board meeting, we exercised an emergency procurement and have allocated an amount not to exceed $1 million towards these protective barriers. The barriers cost about $5,000 each. So also last week, also in partnership with the local ATU, I sent a letter to the entire Florida congressional delegation in support of what's called the Transit Worker and Protection Act. I plan to join the ATU leadership in meetings with the staffs of Senators Rubio and Scott in Tampa at the end of this month. And then we're looking at possibly setting up meeting with senators in Washington, D.C. in July. I'm looking forward to working with the union and other transit agencies across the country to pass and enact this important legislation, which will help make bus safety better for riders, pedestrians, and operators as a whole. And then also immediately after the board meeting, there were several statements from bus operators regarding the onboard emergency buttons on the buses. Staff has tested all of these buttons, and as of June 6th, all vehicles were tested and 95% of them work. The 9 of the 190 buttons that were not working have been repaired. Also, as part of that, we are looking in detail at how bus operators are trained to use the buttons, as well as within the Operations Control Center, what the specific protocols are around each of the buttons on the receiving end and how those instances are categorized and logged. That will be a critical part of the safety and security assessment going forward. So next steps on all of these items, installation on the barriers is expected to begin this summer, and we should have the entire fleet outfitted by the fall. Takes a little bit longer because it is a custom design specifically for HART. We also have initiated the independent safety and security assessment. We've hired Transportation Safety and Security Solutions as our third-party contractor. And we actually have a kickoff meeting later today at 1 p.m. The consultant team will be on site. Bless you. Also regarding the statewide safety symposium, that's currently scheduled for July 29th at the Tampa River Center from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then by the end of this month, we are going to launch a rider awareness campaign to highlight the professionalism of really all of the HART frontline employees in the delivery of transit services, as well as really promote the overall courtesy and respect between HART operators and customers. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. The next item of business is the chair's report, but I just want to piggyback on some things that Ben just mentioned. First off, I want to say thank you to you and your staff for stepping out rather quickly on this. Safety of our drivers and our passengers is paramount to HART, and so tackling this as you did with the help of the ATU, I think speaks highly of both you and the ATU and that working relationship we do have. The relationship with ATU is long-standing though. It's not just happening right now. They being HART, have always had a good working relationship with ATU, and I would say it was actually very, very good, and still is. So working with them, making this happen so quickly, again, I commend you and your staff for doing that. And if you look at the dollar allocation, I mean, we have roughly, as Ben mentioned, also roughly 190 buses here, so that should cover just about every bus out there for what we have for safety and protection of our drivers. So thank you for doing that, Ben. Thank you for the report. I want to thank your staff, and I want to thank ATU for doing that also and working with us quickly. So
one question.
Yes, sir.
Ben, when you have buses that are about to go out of service, I see an item on the agenda today, 12 buses have reached their useful life. How are you dealing with that in terms of, I mean, you don't want to be installing these shields while we're turning around and getting rid of the buses. So how are you dealing with that?
Sure. You mean, just to clarify, after we install the bus operator shields on buses, and then after we put them out of service, we actually go through a whole process where we, generally speaking, take all of our equipment out of the bus. I don't want to use the term strip it down. But in these cases, we would actually uninstall the bus operator shield and then look to reinstall it in a new bus. One of the other items on the agenda today is the purchase of replacement buses. I think 3 years worth. So as we get new buses, whether through replacement and/or expansion, we will take materials, including the bus operator shields from the decommissioned buses, and install them in the new ones.
So employees will be trained to install that equipment? Is that correct, or does that contracted out?
So the initial installation will be contracted out. I suspect, and I'll ask Mr. Drainville to correct me if I'm wrong, but I plan on having the in-house capability to, as part of the regular process, to remove the equipment from a bus. I plan on doing that in-house.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments? Jim?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Ben. Pardon my tardiness. Thanks for your patience there. Ben, if you guys covered this, forgive me, but was this a sole source contract? I know that time is of the essence on this, and we want to be responsive. What are the details on that? Did you guys cover that?
Yeah, we ended up and I'm not sure if the official term, where's John at? Yeah, John, is sole source. We just did an emergency procurement and a direct award. So it is sole source, yeah.
Okay, so the emergency nature of that is
warranted. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely warranted.
Yeah, I did want to point out that since our entire fleet is manufactured by Gillig, there were some limitations as far as the options available regarding the bus operator shield, because they were specific to the manufacturer of the bus. So, yeah.
Any further? Okay, thank you. We'll move right on to our first presentation, and this is the FY 2020 preliminary budget overview, and Cindy's going to do that for us. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Cindy Stiglish, Director of Budget and Grants. Today I'd like to present to you the FY 2020 tentative budget from a revenue perspective. And I apologize for my voice. I'm working on a very lovely summer cold. So usually by this time in the year, in the development of our budget, we're bringing to you what is close to a balanced budget. But as you know, last November put us into a different way of approaching and developing our budget. So in this presentation, I'll focus today on our revenues. So I'll talk to you today about our budgetary priorities for FY20, the revenue projections with and without our surtax, sales tax, how we're approaching our expenditure planning for FY20, including developing our program of projects for the Independent Oversight Committee, and what our next steps are between now and the end of September. So in our presentation to you this time last year, this slide said budgetary pressures and cash flow and fund balance were at the top of the list. Obviously, those are still priorities for 2020, but we have a whole new set of influences going into 2020. Stewardship of sales tax revenue. HART will have an unprecedented amount of revenue to budget over the next 30 years, and with that comes a whole new level of fiscal responsibility, stewardship. I think I'm getting feedback. And reporting transparency. Is that better? No?
There's not a phone call. There's no connection.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, we'll check it out.
Okay. You want me to continue or wait?
Yeah, please continue,
Okay.
unless it's annoying anybody. Okay, thank you.
So we'll need to be able to show and communicate to our public exactly how we plan to spend those new tax revenues. Capital program development. For the first time in HART's history ever, we'll be able to develop a proactive, robust capital improvement plan. No longer will we have to rely solely on our limited federal funding that has been really insufficient to even bring our resources and our assets into a state of good repair. Cash flow and reserves. Many of our directors have recognized and lauded us for being able to do what we do on a very limited budget. In the past, we've had the goal of adding back to our fund balance rather than taking from it, but it has been a challenge with the increases in our cost of doing business. So with the new tax revenue, that will provide us not only a more steady influx or a more even stream of revenue, but for the first time, we'll be able to build a reserve that will allow us to use as a match as we progressively and aggressively pursue federal funding. Increases in the cost of doing business. On the next couple slides, I'll show you that our modest increase in revenues without the surtax will barely cover CPI increases. As one example, we know that our healthcare has increased over the last few years and will continue to increase by almost $750,000 in FY20. Service enhancements. We'll continue to operate routes like 275LX, which have been very successful but are underfunded. Based on our tax revenue, we're given the opportunity to offer a level of service that we didn't see possible at this point in HART's future. Specifically in FY20, we are looking to advance the next 5 years of service as outlined in the Transportation Development Plan. And finally, innovative mobility solutions. We're excited to be planning a tri-area on-demand circulator service in the USF Innovation District, West Shore, and downtown Tampa areas. We're also partnering with Proterra for the delivery of 10 electric buses in the spring of 2020, and we're still looking at autonomous vehicle solutions. So here I'd like to highlight some of the very high-level changes in our FY20 revenues that we can expect without the surtax. The net increase projection over FY19 is about $2.8 million. We're projecting a 9% increase in our ad valorem, which is about $4 million, and a modest 3% increase in our fare revenues for about $335,000. However, that's offset by decreases in both our state grants and our local contributions, which is almost a $2 million loss in revenue. As far as state grants, I wanted to highlight the 275LX decrease of about $1 million. I want to note that FDOT is not taking money away from us. Going into 19, we had several grants that had been provided for various routes that had not been spent down. So in FY19, FDOT graciously allowed us to amass all of those grants and use them toward providing the 275LX. Unfortunately, that funding will be exhausted at the end of FY19. You'll see later in a presentation that I'll be giving for a grant award that they have given us $240,000 in FY19 for that route. But that route costs HART about $2 million a year. So as you can see, it is not fully funded. FDOT is also giving us grants for the Uptowner and the Downtown On-Demand service that I alluded to earlier, and we'll have a modest increase in our annual operating block grant. As far as local contributions, over the last 2 years, Hillsborough County has supported the add back of the routes that were cut during the Mission Max campaign to about $2.3 million per year. However, that funding will not be renewed in FY20. They have offered about $750,000 for the Uptown solution that I referred to, and we've also were able to secure some public-private partnership support of that endeavor as well. So this is a breakdown of the FY20 revenues without the surtax. Excuse me. I wanted to illustrate here that ad valorem continues to be the largest portion of our operating revenues at about 55%. Farebacks recovery has continued to be about 16% over the last couple of years, and our federal, state, and local contributions is about 27%. What I wanted to illustrate here in particular is that if you look at the difference between FY20 and FY19, that's a modest growth of about 3.5%. So again, going back to what I had mentioned before, just in healthcare costs alone, without the sales tax, we would not be able to increase our service model from what it is today and be able to stay in the confines of our limited budget. So now I'd like to introduce you to the sales tax revenue and take a look at what that means for us both long and short term. The next few slides will illustrate this revenue stream in a couple different ways, but wanted to make a very clear picture of how it's broken down and distributed. Sales tax started to be collected in January, and we've received our first distribution in April. To date, that's about $28 million. Those funds are being held in a reserve and will be held in reserve until January of 2020 when we have the opportunity to spend that. Over the next 30 years, the sales tax is projected to be about $15 billion. HART, by charter, was given the ability to have 45% of the allocation, which is about $6.5 billion over a 30-year period. So for budgeting sales tax revenues in fiscal year 2020, well, this is another depiction of how that breaks down for us in terms of the allocation. You can see that 45% needs to be spent on enhancing bus service, 35% is dedicated to fixed guideway projects and expenses, and 20% can be spent on any project to improve public transportation. And this is how they allocate over the next 30 years. So for budgeting sales tax in fiscal 2020, we'll be looking at the entire calendar year 2019 collections and 9 months of collections in 2020. The sales tax is on a calendar basis, we budget on a fiscal year basis, beginning in October. So our portion of the sales tax was estimated to be $136 million for calendar year 19. We are currently trending at about $124 million. So going into FY20, we will budget to that level, not knowing exactly what the first year's collection will be. We want to be conservative in our estimates and not overestimate our revenues. So this is a pictorial of what that total amount of collection will be for 12 months of 19 and 9 months of 20, with the allocations going into each of those respective buckets. Interestingly, if you look at our current operating budget for FY19, which is about $111 million, this 21 months of additional revenue more than triples our budget. Of course, in future years, we'll only be budgeting 12 months of that revenue collection, so this is a little bit of an anomaly. However, whatever's not spent will be carried into future budget years. I think it's important to note here that, again, and I may have stated this before, but I want to reiterate it, that this first year of collection is sitting in reserve until we have permission to spend it. So hence, we have not begun any projects. We are planning those projects, but that money cannot be spent until January of 2020. The other piece of this pie here is the fixed guideway pie, $77 million. We anticipate that this allocation will amass in reserve for a few years based on doing some studies that will reveal the best use and project for that funding. So as part of the referendum, the charter amendment said that by September 30th of each year, an independent oversight committee will receive and review our projects to be funded by the sales tax. So we're in the process now of developing that project list. So I'll highlight again some of the operating expenses that we know we'll look to the surtax to help fund, namely continuing the service that was previously provided funding for by the Hillsborough County. Again, operating a largely underfunded 275LX and implementing the tri-area on-demand circulator service, and of course advancing service from our TDP for the next 5 years. As far as our capital expenditures go, back in October, we brought to the board our transit asset management plan, and we noted that going into FY19, we had a backlog of $43.5 million worth of items that had met their useful life. So at the top of that list was the need to replace 80 buses, paratransit vehicles, supervisor vehicles, maintenance vehicles. Our fare boxes are 20 or 25 years old. Our shelter infrastructure program has been very underfunded, and we know with increased service we'll have to also increase that program as well. As far as presenting a plan to the IOC, we're working in concert with the Metropolitan Planning Organization, who's been charged by the county to coordinate the efforts of the IOC. We have a meeting with them at the end of this month, and then the IOC will convene in the month of July. They'll be discussing their bylaws, their processes, the ways in which they will want us to present projects to them, as well as how they will evaluate our projects in being in accordance with the charter amendment. So our next steps. The property appraiser announces property values on or around July 1st. We'll bring back to you for adoption the tentative millage on July 15th, and then we'll bring a tentative balanced budget back to the board in August, and then we have final adoption of our budget in September at our 2 public hearings. According to the charter amendment, the IOC project list is due to them by September 30th, and it must be approved by our board. So coming to the board in September for final approval of our budget would satisfy that criteria. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain.
Let me just start off by saying thank you. Good brief, Cindy. I do have one question, and then I'll open it up for everybody else. In terms of the fixed guideways and holding funds in reserves, you said probably for a couple of years. Is that also something that goes before the IOC for approval to hold those funds with the understanding they would be used for fixed guideway in the future based on the study?
Yeah, it's my understanding at this very, very preliminary point where we do need to meet with the IOC and understand their processes, that every year, irrespective of whether something has been approved in the past, we will need to present what we plan on doing for that next year.
Okay.
So until that project list is approved every year, those funds will just sit in reserve.
And then, if I may, one of the things that staff is going to launch this summer is a all-for transportation visioning process where we're going to outline specifically what types of bus services they're looking for in regards to expansion, as well as what any potential future fixed guideway network should look like in the future and when. $130 million per year is a lot of money, but the desires for transit expansion probably far, are much greater than $130 million per year. So we still need to reach out to the community stakeholders, our customers, to get an idea of what their priorities are regarding those dollars. But in the meantime, they will be set aside in a separate escrow.
Okay. We'll go right down the line. Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A great presentation. Thank you very much. With regard to the 20% for other stuff, what is the process being used to help determine what that wish list is going to be?
So currently, staff is developing what they think based on not knowing what the IOC thinks, such that the 45% and the 20% can be used to both add service on the street and all of the ancillary items that would be required to do that. So part of that would be the buses, the infrastructure, as I mentioned, the bus stop infrastructure, and other items that would be needed in order for us to provide that additional service. So we are developing a long list of projects, and we will help, we would look to the IOC to determine if they think that what we're presenting to them falls within that 45, 20, or amassed 65%.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we've mentioned a lot about the so-called approval process of the IOC. Because that's a subject in the litigation, I would just like our counsel to describe the scope of that approval, what it entails.
I believe what the charter says is the IOC literally is supposed to review the submitted projects to ensure they comply with the requirements of the referendum that was approved by the citizenry. Part of our adversary's argument is that it somehow grants them a transcendent governmental authority. It does not do that. So their rules and regulations, which they are meeting in July to craft, in my opinion, have to be crafted simply to implement and set procedures that require the information to show the expenditures are consistent with the charter. So I think that's what they're going to come up with, and I think that it's going to be consistent with the charter, and that's why we're working in the way, in the way that we are to try to craft our programs already. So I think there'll be every project submittal will probably have a summary that deals with, for example, our allocations, some of which will be in reserve, some of which will be expenditures in that year.
Sure. Great, thank you.
Yeah, and that's a good point versus, I said approved, and it is really review versus approved.
Well, the word approved is in the referendum.
It is.
So
It is.
It's a question of how you interpret approved, although the context in the referendum language is very clear that it's not a philosophical type approval. It's strictly with consistency with the charter language.
Correct. That's why the concept of approval simply means conformance as opposed to an independent policy decision.
Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioner Kent?
Thank you. I kind of have my voice gone a little too. Just in terms of branding, I'd say the HART visioning rather than the all for transportation visioning as we move forward. And thank you for the presentation. I know these pages aren't numbered, but I guess it's 4. I'm looking at a little, and we have this kind of in-between period here, budgeted wise, while we await what we'll have. But in terms of 275 LX, it costs $2 million a year
Yes.
to do that. And how many trips does it do? What's the schedule for that?
I believe there's about 20,000 rides per month. I do have staff in the audience. If I don't know, Chris, do you want to?
We don't have to look at the particulars of that. I'm just pointing out that right now that is being paid for by FDOT dollars. It goes to Wesley Chapel across his counties. I've been a really strong advocate of the fact that I think the role for FDOT to play, honestly, is not to build parking garages, which is what we're looking at with this other whole plan, but to fund operations. And I just, it's particularly when it goes across county, since they have been pushing for that so hard, since that's been the regional push. So I just want to watch that, because those routes are typically very low numbers relative to anything else. And I don't understand why we should be funding something that is low ridership, that crosses counties, that we should all of a sudden, which is what I've been concerned about all along, is that we take responsibility for that rather than serving what we need to serve in county, the really busy routes that need more service, and that we need to really look at that going forward. I just draw a little attention to that. The second thing I draw attention to is the on-demand services, both in the university area and in the downtown area, because across the country the on-demand services have been proven to be inefficient, costly, and really not what we should be moving towards. So in terms of rethinking them when we're paying for them, we should be, I think, just as we cut out the HART, what was it called, the HART, the on-demand that we had going to the...
Oh, the hyperlink.
Yeah, hyperlink. Because we were paying, and I think most people don't realize this, but $16 per person per a trip. They were paying $1 to $3 for it. And these were trips under 3 miles. I say we were paying, I'll say FDOT was willing to pay that. It wasn't an efficient service. It wasn't a good service. There were people that just got frustrated to the point that they couldn't get service. We weren't monitoring it. It's really not the way we should be giving service either in downtown or the university area. If this is on a demand service, really that's something for Uber and Lyft to do, and they're being subsidized right now hugely by venture capital to do that, because they can't afford to do it either at the cost they're doing. So anyway, I just want to again point that out, kind of a philosophical thing moving forward. May not affect this year's budget so much, but in the future as something that we should be looking at. And I think I guess that's it about these with regards to what we're looking for. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Mullins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cindy, thanks for a great presentation, and thanks to staff for all the hard work on it. Just two quick points, or well, one question. Actually, regarding Commissioner Kemp's comments, I think I had an idea as you were talking, perhaps a map that shows us a ratio, basically, of ridership versus cost for the route might be helpful in the future, or a chart.
Well, there is something like that included in every single monthly board report, so you can look.
Yeah, like a visual representation. That
Sure, that would be.
But
I think it's part of a bigger discussion, actually, in terms of that. But
yeah, because I think there's a more of a qualitative discussion. I know that routes, the value of routes come up versus their costs. So I just think moving forward, having that in a display, kind of for reference, quick reference, might be good for our discussion, future discussions. I just had one quick question back on slide 5, I think it was. And it's just a quick detail question. I think historically our fare box recovery has been, actually, let's see, slide 5. the passenger fare pie piece at 16%. I think our fare box recovery, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think historically has been above 20. Am I right?
Actually, last year in FY19, it is about 16%, but you're right. In previous years, it has been higher, up to about 21%.
Right, about 21. Is that notable? I mean, is there a particular reason why that shifted downward?
Ridership has just decreased.
It's just due to ridership?
It's due to
Okay.
ridership.
Is there any, I know our grants have, that shifted, but it's mainly due to ridership?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kay.
Thanks. There was a whole nother area that I forgot to tap on. What FDOT is now, excuse me, paying for the streetcar for free ridership? How much are they? What is that a year?
$890,000 a year for 3 years. This year was the first year. We have 2 more years of $890,000 per year.
Right, and it's been filled, and I don't know. I'm still not. I know it's serving in the morning now, which is helpful, but I don't know exactly what the schedules are for that either. But moving forward after 2 years, I'm thinking about that, but I'm also thinking about that with regards to the 6-cent tourist tax, at least as doing part of that. So I just thought I'd raise that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, any more questions? Thanks, Cindy. Appreciate it. The next set of items we have are, of course, the committee action items. I will tell you we have 10 items in here. Most of them, as I look at them, are in the course of normal business, but we can go through all 10 of them if everybody likes, and then we can, and our vote is to move these to the board. Approve and move them to the board is what we're looking to do for these here. And we can either do them as a group or we can pull individuals out. I'll leave that up to the committee here. Do we want to walk through each of them? Okay, we'll walk through them and see how fast we go through them. Okay, the first one is action item A, authorize the chief executive officer to award a contract for the Marion Transit Center concrete rehabilitation project to Case Contracting Company. And this is basically refurbishment of some of the areas down there at Marion Transit Center. Do I have a motion to move this?
So moved.
Okay. Okay. And I got a second.
I got a question.
Yes, Mark.
I want to know on that, no information, how they're going to do is the benefits of some of the local workers or whatever, how they're going to go about distributing and then spread some of that. Well,
Do we have
I'd like to
anybody
know
here that
more
can talk?
on that.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Committee. My name is Ron Giroux. I'm a project manager here at HART, and I'll be handling this project at MTC. I'm not really sure I understood the question, sir.
Well, even like, is there going to be some local workers? If you're going to spread it out, even with minority, different ones, or how are you going to go about, how it's going to impact our...
So the bid went out on the street. We tried to solicit as many larger contractors as we could in order to get somebody who would be able to come in here and do that type of work, because I'm not sure we understand the magnitude of the amount of concrete work that needs to be done there. It's essentially all 3 streets that wrap around the Marion Transit Center, starting on Morgan and Fortune and then Marion itself. Hasn't been repaired since it was built, and a lot of the panels there, if you actually get out to this transit center, they're degrading. So in order to get a construction company that can come in there and actually operate and do the work while operations are still being conducted, we're going to have to shift the way the buses go around that transit center so we can still provide service to the customers. We needed somebody who could come in, that we were confident would be able to come in, do the type of work we're looking them to do, and do it properly and quickly. So they're going to hire their own subcontractors. I'm not sure who those are going to be. We've worked with Case in the past. They're a fantastic contracting company, and they do great work for us. So I'm not sure. Typically what happens is once they're awarded the contract, I deal directly with their prime, and then they deal with the subs. So I'm not sure who they're going to sub out, but that'll all be after the award is done. I'll know more information about that after the award's made.
Because even as it moves forward to the full board, if any information that I can read on or pass on, because there's some questions on it, I would love to have any information. So when it get to that point, I'd like to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Ronald, if you can just keep the committee informed, that would be great.
I will do that.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Commissioner
Yes.
Kent?
I just assume we have some kind of regular notice and policies in terms of, we always mention that with every procurement at the BOCC, in terms of minority contractors.
Yes, there's a DBE percentage that's been rated on this at 8%, but I know one of the subs that they're looking to hire is a DBE, and it's about probably half of the total contract will go to them, so it's going to be about 50% roughly DBE on this. So.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion? Okay, we motion. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, approved and moved to the board. Number B, or item B, authorize the chief executive officer to dispose of 12 diesel revenue vehicles through competitive sale.
Oh, one question.
Yes, sir.
It's a pretty large contract. Is this contingent on the referendum money? I know a previous.
We're on item B.
Yeah,
Did
so-
they dispose
Oh,
of-
I'm sorry.
Okay, motion, we have a motion, second. You got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Approved and moved to the board. And I believe this is the one you were referring to,
Yes.
David, is authorizing chief executive officer to purchase up to 96 40-foot compressed natural gas powered heavy-duty transit buses from Gillig, of course, not to exceed the amount of $51,840,000.
So I guess my question is I'm assuming this is dependent on the successful referendum. So is the contract worded so that we are able to get out of the contract I do not have any fear that we will win this lawsuit, but still being prudent, I need to ask that question.
No, yeah, and I'm going to have Mr. Edmondson or Scott, if you can answer this question in greater detail. But no, it was our desire to be positioned to order at a minimum the replacement buses for our existing fleet. But yes, they would presumably be funded by the transportation surtax dollars. But the contract is structured in such a way, so I will have staff provide you with the greater detail.
Good morning, Scott Cranberg, Chief of Maintenance and Facilities. And that's correct. After we would have talks with Gillig, we really just want to solidify our schedule. And once we did that, then we would figure out the details.
So, John, do you want to outline specifically what's in the overall purchase agreement with Gillig?
John Edmondson, pleasure to meet everybody. Our purchase order and our purchasing contract allows us to specify an amount to place the purchase order and begin the production scheduling process. Once a pre-production meeting with that vendor is held, at that time is where we will confirm the final order or the final number of units to be ordered, and production will actually begin immediately following that. That pre-production meeting will take place likely, if we're placing the purchase order in late June, early July, that pre-production meeting will take place first part of next year, January, February. At that time, we'll have a clearer picture of what our funding model needs to look like, and we'll have a much clearer picture of what the final order number will be for that purchase order.
So you could, up to that point, you could cancel the contract?
You could cancel that particular purchase order in its entirety if that's what's called for at that time, yes.
We got Councilman, you had a question?
Yes, question, Mr. Limmer. And the timing on the funding on this will be coming from the 45% of the sales tax allocation?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And that'll come over the next 12 to 24 months. So that won't, how significantly will that impact other plans that you're hoping for? Or will it?
It will not. So the 45% of the transportation surtax is designed and intended to be used to expand bus service throughout the county. As part of expanding bus services, it's the purchase of the vehicles, which is a capital expense. The day-to-day operating and maintenance expenses associated with that service, as well as any requisite facilities that are needed to provide that service, specifically bus shelters, bus bays at transit centers, etc. So
That's the 45% of the 45%.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, understood.
Commissioner Kent?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the fact, I know I've been the prime promoter of electric bus, and I know that we have 8, I think, electric buses kind of on reserve on these same conditions, that if we didn't have the funds available, they would go somewhere else instantly, because there's other jurisdictions interested in getting them. But I know with 96, we talked about this, the buses have a life of about 7 years, and it is bus replacement that we desperately need. Some of these replacing diesel, unbelievably half our fleet, I think, is about half our fleet is diesel. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'm okay with this, even, but I'm looking at it as an interim phase.
yeah, yes. If I may, Mr. Chairman, absolutely, Commissioner, thank you for raising that issue. As HART looks to not only replace its fleet on an ongoing basis, as well as expand service, we'll be looking at a diverse array of bus options. That includes different types and sizes of buses. In particular, what is the role of low and no emission vehicles? And we're very much looking forward to piloting the electric bus option using those 10 buses in the very near future, because that will really allow us an opportunity to evaluate that technology for our future needs. And I very much look forward to seeing electric buses as part of our overall fleet strategy for providing services. So the test is going to go a long ways.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you all for the great information. Good, and good presentation. The quick question, so it's, of the 96 buses, 80 are replacing buses that have outdone their useful life. 16 are required for service expansion. Is this purchase, I guess, tied to or contingent upon expansion of the maintenance facility? Or can these all be accommodated at our current facility?
Well, right now we are at capacity at 200 buses, but we are looking for other satellite areas where we could actually stage other buses.
Okay. So that the 16-ish, I mean, roughly would be, given that's expansion and above the 80, would it be like maybe a partnering agreement, a wholesale rebuild of a facility? What are we looking at with that?
Yeah, so staff is, we do have the capacity in order to accommodate the maintenance of all of these vehicles, including the replacements plus the 16 of expansion. However, we're also concurrently moving forward with trying to find a staging site. So then that way, as we're receiving buses, bringing them online, replacing buses, we have an off-site staging location where we can be more flexible with our limited real estate at the 21st facility.
So it's
So,
really just staging?
yes,
Not
yeah.
yet. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Knight?
Okay, yes, and you also said early on in the meeting that the shields and all that stuff is transferable.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
That's my question.
Okay. And I will just, I'll close this, no more questions, by saying this is kind of long-term coming. We run one of the oldest fleets out there in terms of a transit agency, so renewing a lot of these buses or swapping them out is very well welcome, so good. Okay.
Move to adopt.
Okay.
Second?
We got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion's approved, and we'll move it to the full board. Thank you. Okay, item 4, or D, certifying proposed ad valorem tax millage rate for the fiscal year 2020 budget. And I've got Cindy back up there.
So as I mentioned, the property appraiser announces the taxable values slightly before or by July 1st of every year. We have 35 days thereafter to certify the not to exceed millage rate. At this time, I don't have but a preliminary assessment, so I did not present those numbers to you today. They will be available by our July 15th board meeting. If the taxing authority does not respond within 35 days, the most that we can levy is the rollback rate. So we have typically always come to you with a recommendation of a continuation of a $0.5 mil every year. I anticipate that that's what we will be doing again in July. So at the point at which those values are known, we'll prepare the item and bring that back to you before the July 15th board meeting.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Motion's approved. Thank you. Move to the board. Okay, E, authorize Chief Executive Officer to execute a public transportation grant agreement between Hillsborough Transit Authority and FDOT for transit urban corridor funds to assist with the operating costs of Route 20X, an express route service between Land O'Lakes and Pasco County. The amount is $248,000. Any questions? Do I have a motion?
Move to adopt. Second.
I got a motion and a second.
I have a question. An express route between Land to Lakes, okay, Land to Lakes not, because we have the 275 LX, but this would be a whole new service.
This is a continuation of the 20X. We've been operating this route for, I'm not exactly sure how many years, but this is just a continuation of that route,
Okay,
of the funding of this route.
sorry, I haven't been very familiar with that. Might be good, right, to have a picture.
Graphic.
There you go, with ridership too.
And this grant, I would point out, does fully fund the route, and there is no HART match to this.
Good, good.
Thank you.
All right. I have a motion and I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, great. Approved. Move to the board. F, authorize the Chief Executive Officer to execute a public transportation grant between HART and FDOT for transit urban corridor funds to assist with the operating costs of Route 275 LX. And this is in the amount of $240,000.
So moved.
Second.
Second, I got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay, approved. Thank you. Move to the board. Okay, we're making our way through these. Okay. Item G, authorize the CEO to execute a public transportation grant between HART and FDOT, again, to assist with operating the Tampa Downtown or On-Demand service in the amount of $760,000.
So moved.
Second.
And I'll just restate my
Yes.
whole thing that I really don't think these are efficient ways to use funding for transit.
Yeah.
Could I just
Yes.
also offer a comment? As I understand, the downtowner is now going to evolve into a hybrid system where there'll be a point-to-point service as well as an on-demand. And I think there is some consideration of charging a fare for the on-demand portion. Is that, I mean, I'm just hearing this sort of on the street, not necessarily anything I've heard from you all, but.
So thank you very much for the question. Currently, the contract regarding the downtowner and the downtown partnership is set to expire, so we're extending that contract out, and then we'll be paying for that additional service via the FDOT dollars that are on the table today. As we move forward, what HART is going to do in partnership with some of the community organizations is seek a request for proposals to provide any combination of flex and or point-to-point services in 3 districts throughout our county. Those districts are downtown, uptown, as well as West Shore. So specifically to the options, we very much look forward to what the marketplace has to offer to see what the most advantageous solution is going to be for for one, two, or all three of those areas, and again, combining flex and point-to-point.
That's what I was thinking. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We do have a motion and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay. Approved. Move to the board. Item H. Authorize the CEO to execute a MOU between HART and the Tampa Downtown Partnership. to
I'll
assist
move
with-
approval.
Second.
Second. Any, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion's approved. This was just a continuation. Item I, authorize the Chief Executive Officer to execute a public transportation grant between HART and FDOT to accept Transportation Regional Incentive Program funds to assist with the costs associated with the Regional Inter-Jurisdiction Mobility Project in the amount of $2 million. And I have Cindy up there again.
So the Regional Interjurisdictional Mobility Project is also known as Flamingo, which is our smart card technology that we've been working on for the last couple of years. So this resolution will allow us to receive an additional $2 million in funding toward the completion of that and take that into full implementation. Back in FY18, FDOT programmed $1.4 million with a slight match from HART in the amount of $226,000. In FY19, they have programmed this $2 million. It does not require a match on HART's behalf.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Question?
Is this, is a form of technology for this chosen yet, or is this go to RFP, or how does this work going forward?
No, we currently have a contract with a company called Init, and they're developing the technology. It'll be both app-based and media-based, whereby those cards can be loaded and tapped on the bus.
Thank you.
Mr. Melendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Cindy. Might be good at the board to maybe just do like a high-level overview,
Yeah.
because this has been, this is kind of the culmination of
Yeah.
a lot of work, so, good, so
Yeah,
thank you.
and that's a good point, bringing in some of the past and the efforts we did on the past, because we do have a few new board members, so that would be very good to do, so.
Okay. Will do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I believe I have a motion.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move that to the board approved. Okay, I believe we're on item J.
Move approval.
Okay, got a move.
Second.
I got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, move approved. Move to the board. Thank you. Okay, item K, approval of revisions to HART board policy. David, you want to give us some background on that?
If you'll turn to page 7-33 of your packet, you'll see the change. This is the change in policy dealing with the makeup of your officers pursuant to a motion by Ms. Kemp that was approved last time. I drafted the policy, which you will see on page 7-23. It simply says that with the exception of the requirement that at least one county elected representative, any board member may be elected to serve as an officer. So essentially, the policy's been changed. Rather than having one county, one city, and one not, it simply has anybody other than at least one of the officers must be a county elected. Other than that, you have no limitations on who your officers can be.
So moved. So
Okay.
moved. Sorry, I'm really losing it here.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, approved. Thank you. Send to the board. And I believe it's the last one. Authorize the CEO to execute the station sponsorship agreement between Public Supermarket, Tampa Historic Streetcar Society, and the City of Tampa and the Hills and HART to allow Publix to sponsor the streetcar system by naming a station stop. And I believe that station stop they want to name is in Channel Side at station stop number 5, I believe.
Good morning, Sylvia Berry, and I'm Deputy Attorney for HART. As many of you may be aware, Publix will be opening a brand new public store downtown, and in conjunction with that, they would like to sponsor and partner with HART, THS, the City of Tampa, and sponsoring a station stop and naming the station near Channelside for 1 year for $30,000, which should cover the cost of that. So we're excited about it. Their grand opening will be August 15th, and so we would like to advance this to the full board for approval.
One question, how do we determine the value? I realize that's sort of an esoteric
The value of the,
yeah.
we do it basically based upon the cost for this particular one. It's not one of the bigger ones that we've done in the past, but this one will cover the cost of this sponsorship and the benefits that will be received.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is great, another public-private partnership or at least support. I think as we look at, additional sites and plans in the future, I love the idea of engaging. I'm sure you guys are already thinking of this, but I would love to see more of it. Thank you.
Yeah, not only the specific station stops themselves, but the line itself, the vehicles, very much interested in opportunities that don't take anything away from the historic nature and the cultural significance of the Tico Streetcar line, working with the THS board as well.
Good job.
I just like to say moving forward, I'm fine with this, but moving forward, I'm concerned honestly about our personal branding and this deterring from it. So, I wonder about the use of the funds moving forward. I think it's a good thing at this time, but I don't particularly like the idea of moving forward with a bunch of sponsorship and things like that over our vehicles. I think it's time for us to assert our own brand, and like I see in most jurisdictions, once we have the resources, because this is a small part, and I think our brand is worth a lot more than that if we start to build a transit agency that is recognized and noted, and I wouldn't want to lose that. I just want to express that.
Well, I'm gonna just piggyback on that too. I've often seen some of the buses, and there's particularly a few buses that run right along Kennedy near where I live, and so I often ask, what does this branding cost us in terms of our own brand? I know there's at least one bus out there where the only place you can see HART at is in the very front of it, and I believe that sticker part is about that big on a 40-foot bus. And so, as we look at these, I think we ought to look at our branding, and by basically subletting out our bus to some company or some firm out there, how much does that cost us in terms of our brand? And as we look to enhance transportation in the communities out there, we also want to look to enhance our appearance and what people think of us. And part of that is what we put on our buses and what we put on the trolleys, understanding, of course, the city owns most of those. But still, branding is important in today's era, and how we do that is important, and negative branding will cost us. So I'm just piggybacking, I'm hopping on a soapbox that I've had for 4.5 years, so go ahead.
Just a quick comment. Yeah, we a few years ago, and David will probably remember this, we went through an issue where, branding and what we put on our buses was, we were put to the test. We changed our policy, and I think we worked through that really well. I definitely hear your concerns, and I wouldn't want us to lose brand integrity, but I think, moving forward, the opportunity is it's all in how you do it, right? Partnering, and because I think part of our brand identity moving forward, and really regionally in the state, even though we do have this new revenue source, partnering, to me at least, is still very important. So I think if we can work, it's how you do it. If we can work it in so that we don't lose that, our brand identity, but we still kind of show what we communicate partnership to the community and stewardship of the taxpayer dollar. I think that's the message I'd like to see. Thank you.
Agreed. Okay, do I have a motion to move this forward?
Move forward.
Okay.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Approved. We'll move that to the board also. This ends all our committee actions. I'll ask any last questions or thoughts before we adjourn. Okay. We're so adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.